I'm Dana Clark, and this is Dana Peterson. So we have the power of the Danas, and we are presenting on TRiO as our functional area. We have not handed out our handouts yet. We have a PowerPoint slide to go with it because we're going to start off with a little game. We don't want to give you the answers away, so we'll hand out the PowerPoints after our start here. So we just wanted to give you kind of a fun idea of some famous TRiO alumni that you will probably know of that started in this program.
So we're going to give you clues, and feel free to shout out the answer as soon as you know who the person is.
So I am an alumna of the Tennessee State University Upward Bound program. Could you open?
You don't get to play this game.
Yeah, our TRiO expert in the room.
Worth $2.9 billion. Commonly referred to by only my first name. Most famous as a talk show host, and known to give away my favorite things. Oprah!
Okay. All right, so you guys have the first one on the first clue. We're going to see how many clues we get in the second one. I am an alumna of MIT Wellesley Upward Bound program, a Jamaican American, 16th greatest college basketball player of all time, retired NBA Hall of Fame basketball player, former center for the New York Knicks. Ooh, we might have stumped you. Current associate head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. Anybody? We got it.
Melissa.
Nice.
Patrick Ewing. All right, last one.
I am an alumna of the Rhode Island College Upward Bound and Student Support Services programs, named after a musical instrument, an actress, currently starring in How to Get Away with Murder. Yes.
Yes.
Viola Davis. And then we wanted to recognize some other TRiO achievers that aren't maybe as famous but have done some pretty cool things. So Franklin Chang Diaz is the first Hispanic astronaut. Donna Brazile is the vice chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee. Bernard Harris is the first African American astronaut. Troy Polamalu plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then Taye Diggs is an actor.
It's just hot.
Yes, good looking, and from the show Rent.
We should have made this picture bigger.
So I'm going to hand these out, the handouts, while Dana starts the presentation.
So now we've kind of given you a sense of some of the people who have participated in TRiO. So we wanted to give you a sense of what is TRiO. So TRiO is a set of federally funded programs. They're designed to help disadvantaged Americans enter and graduate from college. It's important to know about this that people involved in TRiO do not look at this as a program. For people involved in TRiO, this truly is a movement, and it's about social justice and civil rights. And we heard that over and over again in our interviews, that this is much bigger than a federal program. The people who are served by TRiO, as a federal program, it's very prescribed. 2/3 of the participants must have family incomes below $28,000. And they must come from families where neither parent has graduated from college. TRiO programs currently serve 850,000 people a year in 2,800 programs at over 1,000 institutions of higher education and some community organizations. To give you a sense of where TRiO comes from, it came out of the War on Poverty, specifically the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. It was intended as a complement to financial aid. So financial aid was about removing financial barriers for students to higher education. TRiO was established to remove social, cultural, and class barriers. As you can see on our timeline, it started with Upward Bound and quickly grew to add education, talent search, and student support services, hence why it is called TRiO, because those were the first 3 programs. It is now 8 programs, and we gave you a handout so you don't have to try to look at this very full PowerPoint slide. So these are the primary programs that TRiO has. There are 8 programs, and they're all distinct. They fall into 3 category types. The first is pre-college. The pre-college ones are Upward Bound Math and Science, and Talent Search, and Education Opportunity Centers. It's important to know about the pre-college programs. Well, they're housed at colleges and universities. They serve high school and some middle school students, and they do not have a direct tie necessarily to the university in terms of their students. So, for example, we interviewed the Upward Bound director at Century College. They serve students in 3 high schools in the area. Only about 10% of the students that they serve in their Upward Bound program move on to go actually to Century College. So they are not a feeder system. The pre-college programs aren't necessarily a feeder system for the universities that house them. And Dana's going to talk a little bit more about that in issues. The next area are college programs. So Student Support Services, Veterans Upward Bound, and McNair all serve college students. They are housed there, and they are helping students graduate. And then they also have a staff training program. For all of them, the goals are very similar. It's really about college entrance and college graduation. It's also important to know that with those goals, they have very clearly articulated outcomes that are set forth by the federal government, typically around academic achievement, high school retention and completion, college retention, and then graduation from college within 6 years of when students start. The services, while they're all distinct programs, are also very similar. It's about academic support, college and career, counseling and advising, financial aid support, and financial and economic literacy. And then some programs like Veterans Upward Bound have additional services like helping connect them with veteran services. They have a very specific mandate as part of the program to do that. What varies between them would be the students they serve, so the population, and the intensity of the services. So Upward Bound is a very intense program. They work with students typically for 4 to 6 years and have lots of contact. They serve the least amount of students and get the most amount of money because of the intensity. Whereas in Education Opportunity Center, they see tons of adults. They get the least amount of money because their contact is workshops and sort of high touch, not a lot of intense services. Lastly, for you all, since we're based here, we want to give you a snapshot of what TRiO looks like in this state. We have 70 projects here within the state. Those are at 31 different institutions of higher education, and in your handout you will see a chart that shows you who has what programs. We serve about 15,000 students yearly here in Minnesota, and about $20 million of funding comes into the state annually around that.
So we wanted to touch on some critical issues that we observed through our readings and also through meeting with the professionals. One starting with student debt and finance. So Dana went into the idea that TRiO was meant to complement financial aid, and as a part of that, we the advisors and like student support services especially really focus on financial literacy with their students and helping them map out what their debt is going to look like over the 4 years, what loans will be like, and those types of things. And one advisor kind of touched on the idea of having an ethical kind of fight within himself at looking at these students who are gaining so much debt and worried about pursuing this education still and motivating them to stay in school when he knows that this debt is really a financial crisis for them. But he also used examples of like, well, it could be this much worse if you went to a different institution, and looking at how much funding they might be getting through scholarships and those types of things. Another one is program advocacy and funding. So TRiO professionals usually play a political role as well in going to Washington, D.C. and promoting their programs and reaching out to legislators to make sure that funding is continued and that they realize the critical support that these programs offer to students.
So within that, programs are funded on a 4 to 5 year cycle. So every 4 to 5 years, each program has to reapply for federal funding. It's becoming more and more competitive. It's also extremely hard for new programs to start because there hasn't been an increasing amount of funding into that area.
And then with the funding also, although it might seem like a ton of money is going into this, only 10% of eligible TRiO students are actually being served. So they're not reaching all of the population that could be getting these services. Also, institutional support was another issue. So some professionals we spoke to really felt that their institution supported them well and their missions really aligned, and they got increased even funding from some of their institutions, where others felt like they were kind of a thorn in the side of the institution might not want them there, and they really had to advocate for themselves and didn't really align with the institution as much. And then also in our handout, we touched on study abroad access. So today's education really focuses on global competency and really promotes study abroad as an option for all students. But with TRiO students, due to financial status and other barriers, family values and those types of things, study abroad is not something they can access as well. Some TRiO programs have started to create programs that might help with funding and go over different policies that promote access for these students, but it's still an issue. And then also recruiting students. So TRiO seems to be geared more towards traditional students, even though it's focusing on an underrepresented group. So we had advisors that talked about recruiting students who are working full-time or who have families and those types of things that could really use these services but don't have the time to access them. And then finally, just promoting their awareness. So we picked this program because we didn't have a ton of information about TRiO, and one of the advisors said that his role is like just letting people know what TRiO is. So that's a huge part of it too, is getting the general public just beyond those participating in TRiO to know what the program is. And then we also wanted to touch on some interview themes that we just got from our professionals. So Dana touched on the social justice piece and that they really are here. A lot of them came from social justice backgrounds versus student affairs, so they really have an interest in gaining access for all students. Pathways to TRiO professional positions, often the professionals were TRiO students themselves, so they are really invested in the program and they want to give back to students like their advisors had given services to them. And then they labeled their job description as a drop-down box. So yes, they are technically, like in student support services, an advisor, but they also help with financial aid, career services, looking for internships, academic advising, making sure they're staying on top of their classes, those types of things. So they have general knowledge in all student affairs departments, even though they might not be experts in those fields. And they do collaborate with those offices, but they also have a really good understanding of what every office on campus does. And then they're also, we said they started as students, and then a lot of them, so 3 out of the 4, started as students in the TRiO program, and then they also tend to stay in the office for life. So they're not really looking to move across institutions in different student affairs offices. They are in higher education for the purposes of TRiO typically, and aren't moving.
So an example of that, we went to the staff meeting of the EOC at MCTC. The minimum time somebody had been on that team was 18 years. Wow. So so it's incredible. And that wasn't inconsistent with other interviews we had of people who had been there for 10, and they talked about TRiO across the campus, and it was the people who wrote the original grants. I mean, they're talking 25 to 30 years of people who were still there.
And then with the professionals as well, it's a really close-knit community. So within the Twin Cities, especially, and Minnesota, TRiO professional staff tend to know other TRiO professional staff at other institutions, and know their programs and work to enhance their programs so they reflect what's going well in other areas. So they know each other well. And then finally, we just found a really great generosity and passion with all the professionals we worked with. So they really are like passionate. Their life is their work, pretty much is what we got. They gave us really great resources. They touched base with us after initially meeting with them to make sure that our project was going well and see if we needed more information. They gave us a ton of time in our interviews, like we could have talked for hours. So they really have a passion for their work, which was just really cool to see that it's not just their 9-to-5 job every day.
So now that you've heard a little bit about TRiO, what we'd like you to do is just at your table, you can take a couple of minutes to brainstorm what you think the 3 to 5 key professional competencies would be for TRiO staff. So just talk among yourselves, and then we'll report out in about a minute or 2 minutes.
Does anyone have extras?
I guess maybe multicultural background or experience.
Sorry about that.
since obviously they're probably going to have a lot of
Yeah,
multicultural
they're
functions or roles.
Oh. Oh, you didn't get any of those?
I think it's probably helpful that they've been through the program themselves. Maybe not necessary, but I think you can relate to students, you know, in a better way, maybe. Do you guys have all those drinks? Yep, yeah, I think so. We have yours as well. I would think maybe similar to the veterans services, that there needs to be some knowledge of policy and funding opportunities and grants and how money is meant to be allocated. So yeah, you know, it's a unique position in that you can offer programs, but I imagine there's a different set of accountability working in a TRiO center. Especially if you're getting federal funding. Right. Right.
I don't know how to word this, but like obviously you have to be able to connect students to all the different departments and maybe have skills, because they mentioned having skills in like advising and counseling. There's like, it's almost kind of like you have to have all the examples from all the other like areas and then be able to kind of tailor them to the TRiO student.
Right.
I don't know where that is, but that's kind of what that's coming across. What does TRiO stand for? I guess I don't know what that.
So if you guys want to start reporting out just some things that your tables came up with for general coverage.
We said relatability, empathy, knowledge about resources and application process, and positivity.
Okay.
Resilience and self-motivation, because you probably have a lot of roadblocks.
Other competencies.
We said a lot of those things as well, but we also said cultural competency.
Very good. Anybody else have anything?
I have an idea of youth development if you're working with middle school and high school age kiddos.
Yeah. So you guys touched on some diversity, legal responsibilities, so having a lot of knowledge just about funding and those types in general, leadership, campus and external relationships, and then, so this is just the full list of them. Would you have questions about any of them, we can go into that, but
I think another interesting thing to note, I work with a woman who started off her career in TRiO and chose not to go into TRiO, which was also an interesting perspective to have. So from her perspective, in thinking about it, TRiO, because TRiO is a federal program and they're prescriptive in the services that have to be provided, she felt for herself that she didn't have enough flexibility or creativity within that framework, so which is why she chose, and she started in college working with Upward Bound, and that's why she chose not to go that direction, as she kind of looked at the profession and the expectations. For her, it wasn't quite a match. So I thought it was just interesting to kind of hear from somebody who didn't go that way and why not.
so we have about a minute and a half left for questions.
I have a question about who the program is for. So do they need to meet all of the qualifications, like low income and first generation, or maybe just some of them? Like,
So
could they be
2/3
first
have to
generation?
meet both the low income and the first generation.
Okay.
And then they have flexibility with the other third. So they serve
Okay.
students with disabilities, but whatnot. Yeah, great question. Other questions? I think one of the things we learned with TRiO is because it's 8 programs, it's very large. We could have like written a book on it. So we were like, why did we do this? There's so much, which is exciting. But there are, I mean, each program, while there's lots of similarities, are very different. The other thing that was interesting was that there's not necessarily a lot of connection. So MCTC has 4 different programs on their campus. They don't interact that much. They used to have somebody who was in charge of all TRiO programs. They've gone away from that model, and so like we met with the EOC people, and they could tell us a little bit about the history and whatnot, but they didn't really interact with the other people on campus. So that was they are very supportive of each other, yet they don't really have relationships within the campus. I'm gonna go back then.
How are students recruited for TRiO programs? Is it different depending on the individual program type? Or?
Yeah, so I asked someone at Augsburg about that, and basically he said it's a lot of like inside knowledge, so their family members might have been in TRiO, and then they also do send out like postcard mailings and stuff to students that they think will be eligible from certain high schools and those types of things. But he said they always pretty much, they don't always fill every spot that they have, but they almost always do, and so recruitment wasn't really.
And it does vary depending also, because with like the high school, middle school program, they will, they get references, referrals, they target certain groups, whereas with the EOCs, which is the adult population, that's almost all word of mouth. They have workforce centers out in the community, and they do little advertising. It's just somebody who came in and got help, tells a friend, and that's a lot. They go out to places, they do workshops at the prisons, they do workshops in a variety of places where they'll meet people so that they can sort of get the word out. So it really did vary how they brought people into the program.
I'm going to call time. I know there was another question. Well done.